Great. Thanks very much, David. And thanks for the opportunity to be able to present this morning. As David said, we're very busy and we have a lot of projects on our books and we're very active across those projects. So if we move through to the next slide, which is the disclaimer. Obviously, I've only got a limited time this morning, so I'd encourage you to look at our website, look at our various announcements and investor presentations that we put out. And by all means, email us if you have questions about what we're doing. Next slide, please. So this is a really good summary slide. And you know, the three key things I want to talk about this morning are our Gidgee project, our Glandor project, and our whale shark project. And the Gidgee project, to use a real estate analogy, is the cheapest house on the best street. We're located about 15 kilometres north of Kalgoorlie. And you can see, you know, the city of Kalgoorlie-Boulder and the famous Kalgoorlie super pit there, and our project just to the north of Kalgoorlie on the highway within the Barara shear zone. We've also got another project called Glandor, which sits about 40 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie, where we're about to do some diamond drilling on the Salt Lake out there. And then I was up in Onslow last week making final preparations for an aircore program at our whale shark project, which is up near Onslow in the northwest of WA. As David said, our board is, you know, very small, but we've got a track record of finding things, building mines, and then bringing them into production and operating them successfully. And as I said, we've been very active across our projects, and I'm very proud to say that since listing back in October 2020, we've spent about an average 75% of our cash flow on active exploration. So we don't have a lot of overheads within the company. Next slide, please. This is just a corporate snapshot. We did a capital raising just recently. So after that raising, we've got about 70 million shares on issue, so a very tight structure. Part of that raising, we did an options rights issue. So now we've got some listed options, 25-cent options that are trading at about 1 cent. So our market cap at about 10 or 11 cents is about 7 million. And when you consider we've got about 3.5 million in the bank, I think that makes us very, very cheap. My experience, I'm a geologist with about 30 years, started Dore Minerals, built the Andy Well mine after discovering that, and then built the Deflector mine as well. Marion Bush, a geologist as well, and she was involved in building a mine in West Africa in Guinea. Next slide, thanks. So this is our main project, Gidgee, just north of Kalgoorlie. We've been really busy here since listing, you know, almost 2 years ago. As I said, it's a really good strategic land position, 15 kilometres north of Kalgoorlie. And the things we liked about it were it sits within this major regional structure, the Barara shear zone. To the southeast of us, you have the Barara and Golden Ridge deposits, which are being developed by Horizon. And then the structure goes through our land position up to Paddington, which was a 4 million ounce deposit. And then it keeps going further north, and that's where it's called the Bardock shear zone. And that goes up to Zoroastrian, Excelsior, and Aphrodite. So it's a major regional mineralized structure. And it's the key thing within our ground is it's very underexplored. And I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. The great thing is if we discover something here, there's multiple processing options nearby, including Northern Star to the south of us, Norton to the north of us, and Evolution out to the west of us. And there's also nickel sulfide potential in the Highway ultramafic, which hosts the Scotia and Saints nickel deposits. Next slide, please. So we've been busy on the sort of middle part of the project, because that was the part of the project that was granted when we listed. And since listing, you know, almost 2 years ago, we've made a number of discoveries at Gidgee. Marylebone was the first discovery, and one of the first holes we drilled had a couple of metres at 7 grams in bedrock. We then followed that up and we fleshed out a second parallel 1 kilometre long footprint. And you can see those pink dots and pink stars, they're plus 2 gram and plus 5 gram gold intersections. And these are all pretty much without exception, these are all in bedrock. And one of the things that we do when we do our air core drilling, we do gold analysis, but we also do a multi-element analysis. So that helps us discriminate really quickly between things that might be alluvial and things that are actually related to bedrock mineralisation. So quite often when we put out announcements, we put out a gold number and a silver number, because the silver is one of the key sort of discriminants of whether it's supergene mineralisation related to bedrock, potential bedrock source. After the Marylebone discovery, we started sort of fleshing out the air core a bit more. And then we made a second discovery at Blackfriars. That sits in an intrusion at the contact between a mafic and a sediment unit. And that's very similar to the Aphrodite deposit up to the north of us, which is about 1.7 million ounces, and also potentially pretty similar to Paddington as well. One of the key results from that was right at the northern end. We got a metre at 11 grams in the end of the hole, and that had silver and sulfides and things in the chips. So we're pretty excited about that, and we've got some more results coming in upcoming days. We kept drilling, and then we started seeing what looked like a potential third discovery. We now call that the highway trend, obviously because it crosses the highway. It was a 1 kilometre long historic auger anomaly that had never been drilled. Those yellow dots are holes that we've now drilled, but we're waiting on assays for. And we hit an intrusion within the black flag sediments. And some of those holes, notably hole 714 there right next to the highway, hit quartz veining with fresh sulfides in a porphyry intrusion. So we've now made 4 new discoveries in an area, straddled by a major highway only 15 kilometres from Kalgoorlie. And the other thing you can see on the map there is a sort of a brown line that runs up through the middle. That's a pipeline that runs from the super pit to the Gidgee roaster. So there's a lot of infrastructure here, and you wonder why this has never been explored before. If we move to the next slide, I'll try and explain it a bit more. So this is pretty much why the area hasn't been explored properly in previous times. This is a 3D sort of view of those central targets. And what you've got is this paleo channel, which is an ancient river, which is called the Gidgee Paleo Channel. And that runs across the project in a north-south direction. And all the previous drilling that had been done here was very shallow. The average depth of that channel is about 50 metres in the middle of it. But the previous drilling was only about 25 metres and it was angled. So a lot of the previous drilling that was done over this project never even got through the sort of transported sediments that sat over the prospective geology. And what we've been doing is making sure that every air core hole we drill goes through that transported material and intersects the basement. So you can see a couple of things that are really important. So the geology sort of runs off in that northwesterly direction and all the main structures. And then there's some later faults that run in the north-south direction. And we think what's happened is the channel has sort of followed those faults as the path for the channel. And then it's cut across that geology with the gold mineralisation sitting underneath the channel. The channel has stripped off the regoliths, so it makes the gold dispersion very narrow. So you have to go quite tightly spaced with your drilling. But the other key I want to get out of this is the fact that the gold targets cross-cut the channel. And that, is a pretty clear indication that the gold that we're seeing is not alluvial. If it was alluvial, you expect it to sort of run down the channel like it would in a modern river channel. So this is the key slide, I guess, for why this area hasn't been explored very well before. Okay, next slide, please. So if we look sort of step out again at the whole project, we've got about 15 kilometres of this structure called the Barara Shear Zone, and we know that we've got this channel running across it, and we know that a lot of the previous drilling has been quite shallow and ineffective. So one of the things we did earlier this year, we sort of went back to basics and did a target ranking, and we used 3 key components, the structure, the right geology, and the evidence of any fluid or gold mineralisation. And we then ranked all the targets. And so obviously the hotter colours are the good targets, and the colder colours are the ones that are sort of less prospective. And as I said, we focused on that middle area, but now what we're starting to do is sort of look at the northern area and also the southern area. So we've got a 25,000 metre program of air core lined up. Most of that will be at Barara North. We're waiting on assays from the stuff at Blackfriars and Highway. And we've also got quite a few nickel sulfide targets within the project as well. And then depending on how the air core drilling goes, we'll then follow that up with deeper RC and diamond drilling to see if we can then find a bedrock mineralisation. Next slide, please. So an example of that is the northern targets, where we're just about to start a air core program over that main area, which we call Barara North. But before I talk about that, we just want to quickly talk about a target called Lake, which we've started doing a little bit more work on. There's some historic RC drill results there within a structural jog and a DMAG zone. There's some good hits there, sort of 2 metres at 5 grams, quite shallow. And directly along strike to the south of that is a little shaft and some historic workings and about a 20,000 ounce gold resource called Gidgee Dam. So it's obviously in a mineralised structure. There's been no drilling here since the late 1990s. And we're just going through heritage approvals now. And then once we get those approvals, we'll get out there with an RC rig and see if we can test that down dip and along strike and flesh it out into something more significant. One of the main programs we've got going during August is 200 air core holes along the 4 kilometre long Barara North target. You can see the green and purple there. The green are mafic rocks and the purple are ultramafic rocks. And that's the same unit that hosts the nickel sulfide mineralisation at Scotia and Aurochs Saints deposit. It's got a lot of lake cover, but it's very shallow. It's not like the paleo channel to the south. And so the previous drilling there, you can see the little black dots. A lot of them are very shallow. So that upcoming program is about 12,000 metres. It'll take probably about 3 or 4 weeks to complete. And then we expect to see those results probably in about October, November, depending on lab turnaround. Next slide, please. If we jump down to the southern end of the project, there's 2 really interesting targets there. That top picture is a thing called the jog. There's a big dilational jog in the Barara shear zone, and dilational jogs are key targets for gold geologists. And probably the most recent example of that is the Gruya deposit that Gold Road discovered out in the Yamana belt. So there's this dilational jog that we see destruction of the magnetic signature within the mafic and ultramafic rocks above it, which lends us to think that there's alteration and potentially mineralisation there. And then when we did a look at the gravity data, we found a dense body about 150 metres deep below the shear zone. So we're planning to do a diamond hole there once we get some approvals. We've also got another target called 8 Mile, which sits right on the southern boundary of the project, right up against Northern Star. Northern Star have got a deposit called Runway, which is about 300,000 ounces on our southern boundary. But recently they've been doing some deeper drilling, and we think the rumour is that they've made a deeper discovery underneath Runway that's pretty significant. So we did an IP survey right on our tenement boundary to see what's going on, and came up with a really strong IP anomaly, which is, can be generated by mineralisation. That's about 400 metres below the surface. So we're looking at doing a diamond hole once we can find out a bit more about what's going on the other side of the boundary. Next slide, please. This is our second project. This is Glandor. It sits out about 40 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie. It's mostly covered by salt lake, and you can see the photo there of our air core drilling that we did last year. It's a salt lake, but it's not, it's a good salt lake as far as salt lakes go. It's got quite a lot of sort of vegetation cover. So it's not actually that difficult to get around, even in sort of, just four-wheel drive vehicles. But we've outlined a very large gold footprint on the lake, about 4 or 5 kilometres long. And there's a target called Glandor East, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute, where there's some high-grade historic diamond results. The key is the location there. It's in a great location about 3 or 4 kilometres north of where Black Cat are going to build a mill at Majestic. And we've also got the Silver Lake mill a bit further south of that. And then also we're only about 40 kilometres from Kalgoorlie. So if we find something on this project, then there's lots of opportunities to be able to exploit it. Next slide, please. So this just focuses in on that Glandor East target, which we've been aching to get to since we listed, but have been struggling to get a lake diamond rig. We've finally got a lake diamond rig organised, and we're going to be out there within the next couple of weeks. And basically the simple geology here is you've got a contact between a granite and a mafic unit. And there's a number of these sort of west dipping quartz veins that sort of cross-cut that contact. And we believe that they've got a northeasterly strike. And if that's the case, they haven't been tested properly along strike to the northeast or to the southwest. And they have only been drilled down to about 100 metres. So very shallow. And you can see some really nice results there, including 4 metres at 44 grams at only about 60 or 70 metres below surface. So our plan is to get out there and do some holes to test the down dip and along strike potential of these high-grade results, and then see if we can quite quickly work up a high-grade discovery there on the lake that we could then, potentially develop with some of the nearby people out there. Next slide, please. So now getting completely away from the goldfields and heading up to the northwest. This is our whale shark project. It's about 40 kilometres east of Onslow. It's only about 10 kilometres from the coast, and it's Proterozoic rocks sitting under about 50 to 100 metres of Carnarvon Basin sediments. This is a magnetic image, and it shows you a big folded BIF complex that's been intruded by Proterozoic granite. And it's a similar geology to what you see around Mount Isa. And the target here is an Ernest Henry, so an IOCG style deposit. And what we've done so far is we did some MMI sampling, which is a special type of soil sampling that can see through cover. And with that MMI sampling, we outlined some really nice large copper, uranium, rare earth, moly, tungsten anomalies. And you can see them listed there, target A and target B. They sit on the edge of the granite. We're doing some gravity at the moment to just see if there's any indication of dense hematite bodies, which is another signature of ICG mineralisation. And in August, we'll be getting an air core rig, and we'll just be drilling sort of pattern air core drilling over those two targets to see if we can see any geochemical anomalism at the interface between the Carnarvon Basin sediments and the basement. So we're looking, as I said, we're looking for like an IOCG, an Ernest Henry style deposit. And the great thing here is that we're only dealing with about 100 metres of cover, not like South Australia where you have to drill under sort of 400 or 500 metres of cover. Next slide, please. Our final project that I'll just talk very quickly about is our Bangamore nickel copper projects up in the, again in the northwest. They sit in between the Pilbara and the Yilgarn. And the basic model here is we're looking at these Proterozoic age dolerite sills within a sedimentary basin there. And this is a map that Geoscience Australia put together in 2016, where they looked at nickel sulfide potential across the whole of Australia. And this is the map that led Chalice to make the discovery down at Julimar. So I've been looking at this area for quite a few years. And then when I realised that, that there was a lot of similarities there between Julimar and Bangamore, we took a significant land position here. So we've got about 8 or 9 exploration licenses. A couple of those are granted, the rest are application. And we're looking to do some geochem work up here, probably after the whale shark drilling. Next slide, please. So just to summarise all that, what I've done here is I've put all the projects and basically put the stage of exploration for each of those. And you can see that the sort of most advanced targets are Marylebone and some of the targets at Gidgee, and also the Glandore East target at Glandore, where we're going to be doing diamond drilling. And then at Gidgee, we've got a whole heap of other targets that we're sort of moving up the pipeline, so to speak, from air core drilling to infill air core and into RC drilling. Similarly at Glandore. And then you can see the earlier stage targets, things like Randalls and Langwell, where we've sampled some pegmatites, and then our ICG targets at Whale Shark, and then the earlier stage stuff up in the Bangamore. So final slide, next please. So just in summary, we've been really busy since listing. We've been working to uncover what we think is a potential new gold camp at Gidgee. We've got high-grade diamond results and a very large gold footprint at Glandore that we're going to be working to follow up as well. We've got some really nice large ICG targets at Whale Shark that we're going to be doing our first drilling in the next few weeks. And we've also, first mover status in the Bangamore. We've had a number of people follow us in there on the back of the same sort of model. Importantly, for an exploration company, we're well funded and we're very active. We're out on the ground and we produce regular news flow from active exploration across all our projects. And the board, has found things and built things. So we've got that experience to be able to recognise opportunities. And probably most importantly, from a shareholder's point of view, there's a lot of value upside with exploration success. Our EV around about 3 million, I think, is really undervalues what the projects that we have at the moment. So thanks for the opportunity to present, and I look forward to talking to people about our projects in the future.
Thanks, Allan. A great presentation, Miramar Resources. I just wanted to highlight something for people who may not follow resources companies or exploration companies particularly. If you go and talk to the big funds and the institutions and you ask them what are the key things they look for in a company, it's always the people. They start with the people. What have the people delivered? What have the people achieved? And have the people driven value for shareholders in the past? And clearly, Miramar is a company with a board and a capability that have done that in the past. So hats off to you, Allan, and the rest of the board. And clearly, we're watching with much interest to the achievements that you no doubt will make in the future. But I asked this question of Ed earlier. How do you get your hands on something so prospective, so close to a known mining town in terms of Kalgoorlie? And how does the technology help you unlock that ore body that is sitting there that the old timers have walked straight over or may have drilled close to? How do you get it? And how's technology help you get so much value out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and Gidgee is a real example of that. It's all in the timing. So the history of the Gidgee project, it was part of the larger Paddington project at the time that Paddington was discovered. But Paddington was basically outcropping and it had little shafts and workings across it. So they made the discovery there in 82, and then that went into production in 85. But I guess the part of their project which we now have was a bit far from the mill, it was a bit deeper, a bit harder. So it sort of fell off the thinking of the team. And in fact, it was owned by KCGM later on. So it was sort of at the outskirts of the KCGM land package around the super pit in Kalgoorlie. So I sort of say it was in this like no man's land in the middle between two operations. And it was just a bit deeper and a bit harder than exploring the stuff that you have right under your nose, so to speak. And the key was that the fact that you've got this paleo channel running across it, plus you've got sort of outside of that paleo channel, you've still got probably 20 to 30 metres of cover. So it's just that little bit harder than some of the easier targets right next to the mine. And it all depends, who's running the programs at the time and what the focus is and what the budget is. So I guess that's the history of why it hadn't been drilled properly. How we came across it was actually one of my old doré geologists was sitting looking at the tenement website one morning. It was vacant ground. And he said it was vacant ground for about 2 hours and he couldn't believe it. And he just pegged it without even thinking just because of where it was. And then I met up with him a couple of years ago and he said, oh, how about we do a deal on it? And that was it. So I sort of couldn't believe that you could have a land package that close to Kalgoorlie that was unexplored. And if you just looked at the historical drilling over the top of it, it looked like it had been well drilled. But a lot of those were only auger holes and they were only 2 metres deep. So once you strip those holes out, and then once you knew that the cover depth was, say, 40 metres, and then a lot of the holes were only 20 metres and they were angled, as soon as you pull them out, then you ended up with a completely blank canvas almost. So we got really excited about that and thought that, it had potential, especially because it's on that major structure and it's got the same geology. There was potential there to find something fairly decent. And we haven't been very smart. We've just gone out with air core drilling, systematic sort of pattern air core drilling. And every time we've done that, we've come up with really good results. So the trick now for us is to turn that air core drilling into bedrock intersections with RC. So that's the challenge. And we still don't know where the best bits of the project are yet. That's why we're drilling Barara North as well. So it's really exciting. And, and Glandor could be just as good.
And you mentioned drilling techniques and geotech and soil techniques. Now, they've advanced so much in the last even 10 years that the work that KCGM and the others were doing historically, it's almost a blank sheet of paper, but you've got a greater idea of targets, but the technology has advanced so much that you can do so much more.
Yeah, things like geophysics, we've done, I didn't talk about it, but we've done geophysics using like drones and little sort of remote control helicopters and things that weren't around 10 years ago. And these things can fly lower and slower than a helicopter can or a manned, light aircraft, especially when you're flying next to roads and highways and infrastructure. So just the simple fact that you can get a guy with a little remote control helicopter and fly a mag survey, and you can fly it really close to the ground, and you can fly very slow and get really, really good data. You couldn't do that probably 5 years ago. So it's fantastic to be in that location and simply get out there and get good results every time we drill.
Now, talking of exploration into development, into production, you are known for developing the Andy Well project into a significant mining operation. In terms of discoveries and the exploration, any similarities?
I think Glandor East actually looks more like Andy Well because it's sort of narrow, high-grade veins. So that's why we're really, we've been champing at the bit to get out to Glandor East. Gidgee is probably more larger scale than Andy Well. It's going to be a bit more challenging to make discovery there because of that cover. But, all gold deposits are similar and they're all different, we've got really good geology, we've got structures. A lot of the time it's just following up, joining the dots and following up the air core drilling and then getting to deeper drilling. We're still at the very early stages at Gidgee. We haven't really even worked out what's going on at the north and south yet. I'd say the more likelihood of a quicker resource and discovery is probably Glandor East. And hopefully, we'll know what that looks like pretty quickly in September.
And are the majors who are all around you, is what you're doing piquing their interest?
It is, especially down south at the 8 Mile runway area on the tenement boundary there. So KCGM had, drilled out a resource there back in 2013. And then nothing had been done. And then obviously Northern Star took over Saracen and KCGM. So they've been a lot more active and they were drilling literally right up to our tenement boundary. We drilled a couple of diamond holes there and we hit the same geology, but we didn't get mineralisation in that runway porphyry that they had. But if they've made this new discovery right on our tenement boundary there, the deeper discovery, then it's very likely that goes onto our ground. So I'm sure they'll be watching very keenly when we finally drill that, because if it's all one ore body there, then it'll be pretty significant.
Allan, a great presentation, a company sure to watch. I'd urge those watching today to whack it on your watch list and keep an eye on Miramar Resources, stock code M2R. A board and management have delivered in the past, a great location, a big work program ahead and well funded. Allan, all the best.
Great. Thanks very much, David.